So this is Steve Renfro here in Moss Point again with the Moss Point Sports Hall of Fame Oral History Project. And today we have Coach Jerry Alexander, who is a renowned coach in Moss Point. And Jerry, we're glad to have you here today. I'm interested to learn more about your stories about Moss Point athletics. So again, thanks for being here. I'd like to start by asking you, just if you could, just kind of talk to me for a minute about how you got to Moss Point. How were you recruited, I guess, by Coach Miller?
I was. I came to Moss Point in 1975. At that time, I think Moss Point was the fifth largest school in the state, had about 1,500 students in the high school. I had talked to Coach Miller in 74 about coming to Moss Point, but they decided to move a junior high coach up, and so I didn't come, and I came in 75. Probably one of the reasons I came was because of Coach Miller's wife. I was a coach at Gautier Junior High. I coached there for 2 years, and his wife came to watch, I think, Rusty play football against Gautier Junior High. And Gautier Junior High hadn't done very well, and so she saw the improvement Gautier had made, and she told Coach Miller about it and said, you might need to talk to that guy at Gautier. So that's where I think he probably first heard about me, because Gautier had improved a great deal from the years before. So I ended up coming to Moss Point with the invitation of Coach Miller in 1975. But my first visit in Moss Point was the first coastal city that I ever came to from Delta State. I played football at Delta State, came home with a couple of guys, Ernie Wells and Jay Fletcher. We had a long weekend at Delta State, and they said, you want to go to the coast? I said, sure, love to go to the coast. That was in 1968, when the year that they turned the field in Moss Point from going east to west to north and south. Moss Point played their games in Pascagoula that year. And I ended up going to a Moss Point, I believe it was a Moss Point Murrah game in Pascagoula in 1968. Ended up going Saturday night to a game at Perk. So that was my first introduction to the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Never been here before. And that was also my first time to eat fresh shrimp. And I've been eating them ever since.
Well, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. So what was it like working for Coach Miller, coaching with him?
Coach Miller was different. That was a unique experience. I learned a lot from Coach Miller. His organizational skills, his game prep, his practices were long, but his preparation for detail was probably unmatched, and I continued that. Scouting reports, watching film, looking at what other teams did, offensively, defensively, special teams. That was very good. And Coach Miller had a knack for hiring good coaches. He surrounded himself with good coaches, and I was hoping that I would be one of those. When I came to Moss Point, Mike Black was an offensive line coach and a great coach, and Skip Beasley was here, and we had other great coaches. And over the years, he kept bringing in really good coaches that a lot of us turned out to be head coaches at later dates. And he would hire good coaches and took care of his coaches and backed them. And we were very fortunate to have him as a head coach when I was an assistant coach.
So did he hire you to be the defensive coordinator?
He hired me as a defensive coach. I coached linebackers and defensive ends when I first came here. That was in 75. I became the coach that was the defense coordinator, left after the 75 season, and I became the defensive coordinator. And from there until I became the head coach in 1991, I was the defensive coordinator.
Then that was after Coach Miller's untimely death, and you became the head coach. Is that?
That was in 1991. Yes.
Yeah.
He passed in June of 91, and I became the head coach in 1991.
And you were the head coach until you retired. And what year did you retire?
After the 2007 season, I retired, which was in 2008 school year.
Were you also the athletic director the entire time?
I was from 91 to 2008. I was the athletic director and head football coach in Moss Point.
So Coach Miller won one football championship, state football championship, and then you came along after that and won how many?
We won 4 state championships after that. In 1983, we won the AA state championship in Mississippi. That's the way it was ranked at that time. AA, A, BB, and B, I think, is the way it was set up at that time. The playoff system started in 1981, and Moss Point won the state championship in 1983. Pascagoula won, you look at it, 3 coastal counties, Hancock, Harrison, and Jackson counties. Pascagoula won in those 3 counties in 87. And I think Moss Point won in 1991, 96, and 2000. St. Stanislaus won in 2001, and D'Iberville won in 2009. So 8 state championships in the 3 coastal counties from 1981. I think Moss Point ranks 5th in the state, the last time I looked, in all classes as far as winning state championship, the number of state championships goes.
So what memories do you have of state championship games? What were the first things that come to mind?
Well, the support that we had from our fans. And in 1991, my first game to coach was against a team in Ladd Stadium, Murphy High School. Murphy High School was my first job in 1972. So we're playing in 1991, first game as a head coach in Ladd Stadium in Mobile, Alabama. I had a good buddy named Johnny Grave. My brother came over, and he came with a graduate from Florida. He came up and watched the game, and Johnny Grave told him before the game, said, if Jerry can win, at least break even this year, we will probably consider that a great season in Moss Point. And so I found that out later. So we ended up having a little better than a break-even season. Started out 1-2, I think. Won the first game big, and then lost the next 2. And we sort of thinking, well, it's going to be a rough year. Ended up winning the next 13 games, and very fortunate. And that was a big deal for Moss Point. And the fan support we had, and we'd go to play a visiting team, and we would always have as many people there, if not more, than the home team. And that's one of the things I remember about Moss Point. And in 91, we had a team that had just finished, a very talented team that had just finished 3-7. So we knew we had our work cut out for us, but the guys bought into our system, and we worked hard. We came to practice. We were disciplined. We tried to have a attitude of a winner, and and we tried to have the character of a winner, and we tried to. I think we sort of sold it that every person on that team. One thing that we tried to do, every person on that team was important. If you were on a scout team, you were important to give the starters a good picture. If you were a snapper, you were important. If you were a holder on the extra points and field goals, you were important. If you were a kicker, every person on that team was important. And you gave us a good picture in practice and gave the starters a good picture in practice. Then we felt like, and we tried to carry that, we felt like that was going to help us be successful, and we tried to carry that out throughout all my coaching years, that every member of the team was important.
So is that when you say your system, was that a big part of your system, making sure everybody knew they were important?
Yes, that was a big part of it, and attitude, and have a plan. Have a plan, practice your plan, carry your plan out. And some of this stuff came from John Wooten, and I had a friend that gave me some of that information, and I thought it was good. And believe in your plan, execute your plan, practice your plan. All that was very important to us.
Yeah, well, good. So I remember the rivalry we had with South Panola. What's your recollection of that?
Well, South Panola, seems like when we would play them, they were always number one ranked team in the state, and that was a measuring stick. We had great success early on with South Panola. Matter of fact, we led the series and probably still lead that series today with head-to-head competition. And the latter years, they caught up with us some, but early on, first 3 games I remember were 3-point games. Mm-hmm. And we won by 3 points, and after that it began to change. In 2000, I know we went up there and Bill Bozier and won pretty big. And Kevin Fant, one year we went up there, and we were way behind, and had a friend that was a coach at another school, left the game, and we were way behind, and he thought we would have no chance, and looked in the paper the next day and saw that Moss Point had won and thought it was a misprint.
So the first play of the first game we played South Panola, I think you ran, the halfback ran for a touchdown. Do you recall that play?
Casey Smith, I think, ran the ball, and he got open and did a great job of making a big play for us.
How did you must have, the preparation you said was so important. How did you prepare for that first play?
Well, it was just a normal play, and we didn't know that we would make a touchdown. It was just a normal play, to start a game.
Wow. Well, those are some of the most exciting games I've ever seen in football at any level. That was terrific. So, moving on to you were also the athletic director. So, and we were successful during your tenure as athletic director in other sports. What can you?
Well, I know we won South State, I think, 1 year in baseball. And a lot of people don't know this, but I think in 1988, Coach Haynes won the Big 8 state championship. Other sports didn't follow football playoffs quite like other sports didn't follow the football format or the playoff system. And I think Ms. Lewis, Brenda Lewis, in slow pitch softball, won the state championship in 1988 also. And she ended up winning 7 state championships. And I think she's won 7. You go back and look at those same numbers that I talked about early on, since the playoffs started in 1988, they've won 7 state championships in slow pitch softball out of the 10 that have been won by the 3 coastal counties, Hancock, Harrison, and Jackson County.
Wow. Moss Point really had great great athletics when you were
Sure did. And track championships. I know we won the state championship in track in 1983, and won it again, I think, in 1987, I believe. And we've always had a track team that would usually almost always finish in the top 5.
Right. So when you were coach and athletic director, there were a lot of really great players. Can you which ones particularly come to mind that you could point to, and what makes them special?
Well, it's hard to pick out any one. I know Demarius Bilbo, the quarterback, Kevin Fant, the quarterback, John Armstead, the quarterback. All of those quarterbacks were really good quarterbacks. Steve Smith, a little further back, did a great job for us managing the game. And I know in the state championship game, Bilbo probably had as good a game as I've seen a quarterback in Moss Point have. And Tremaine Moore also had 8 catches that night, 100 and something yards, and I think he had 3 touchdowns and had a great game. And we've had Jason Armstead over the years caught a lot of passes. Leon McGee, Simmons has caught a lot of passes for us, and had the running backs George Winesley and had a lot of great running with Francisco Kelly, Jarvis Sellers, as we mentioned earlier. Just a lot of great players, and it's hard to single out just a few. And you had some offensive linemen. Alcindor Jackson, he's the only offensive lineman that ever won the Player of the Year in Mississippi.
Really? Wow.
Clarion Ledger Player of the Year in Mississippi.
Wow. So what about the coaches? Who helped you?
We have great coaches over the years. Bill Lee and Luther Kirkendall were our coordinators most of the years that I was here. Pete Facini, Bill Lee was offensive coordinator. Coach Kirkendall was the defensive coordinator. And Coach Kirkendall and I played college football together. And very fortunate to be able to work with those two guys. Probably 2 of the best assistant coaches in the state of Mississippi, and probably in the southeastern United States. Coach Facini, worked with him a long time. He came here from Long Beach, and I knew my brother-in-law was his friend in college. He came along a little bit after me, and so I got to know him and contacted him from Long Beach, asked him if he was interested in coming to Moss Point. Coach Brewer ended up hiring him as offensive line coach. John Tomes, Scott Sisson over the years, and Jackie McCorvey was the defensive line coach. Did an outstanding job for us. Vincent Norvell was a volunteer coach. Eugene Tick Mosley was a volunteer coach for a long time. He and Willie Chastain and Ed Cooper, they were volunteer coaches, did an outstanding job for us. And they're still in the community, and can't thank those guys enough.
So how did the volunteer coach work?
Well, they came under me. They had the same authority as anybody else, any other coach. If they had a problem, they would always come to me, and I would handle the problem, which almost never happened. And they would Coach Chastain work with the receivers, and they would catch hundreds and hundreds of footballs a day. So we had very few drops in games, and Coach Coop worked with the long snappers, and Coach Norvell worked with Coach McCorvey with the defensive lineman, and he's coaching in Theodore now. I think he possibly is the defensive coordinator in Theodore at the time.
So were the volunteer coaches there at every practice?
They were at every practice.
Oh, wow.
Every meeting, every practice, every trip, every game.
So these were people who were not school employees, and they were not paid? Is that
they weren't paid.
Yeah, well,
early on, they weren't paid. Later on, we did pay them some.
Yeah. Wow. Um, hmm. So, what about the other coaches that might have played for you and came back and coached for you? Were there any of those?
Yes, Lewis Sims was a coach of ours, did an outstanding job. Lewis was a player. He came back as a coach and ended up being a head coach in Moss Point, and now is the head coach in Pascagoula. Did an outstanding job for us.
Yeah. So, just watching football over the years, it's interesting to me how coaches handle problems differently from the sidelines, just viewing things from the sidelines. It always impressed me that you seem to always respect the players, even when they made mistakes or something. Did you talk about how you handled?
Right. I was loud, but I was not a hollerer or a fusser at players. If I had needed to talk to a player about discipline, that was usually done in my office. And I had a sign on my office door that says, you cannot talk your way out of a position that you behaved yourself into. And that was a sign I had on my door. And usually players did not like to come to my office and have a talk about a discipline matter. And I really believed in attitude. I think more people are successful with attitude, and more people fail because of attitude than any other thing. It's the way you think, and everybody has an attitude. But the good thing about attitude, a person can change it today. They can change it tomorrow. They can change it next week. They can change it next year. But attitude is very important to me. I think a coach's attitude and a player's attitude determines the success of a team probably more than any other factor.
Well, you were certainly successful at Moss Point. Could you talk just for a minute about how you've been recognized? Because you're in a couple of Hall of Fames and have been recognized statewide and farther than that, I believe.
Well, I'm very lucky, and I give the credit for my success to the coaches I work with and the players I work with, the administrators I've worked with, the teachers I've worked with. I give credit to them because they're all a part of those awards that I have gotten. I've earned it because of a lot of people working together with me. And I think 2005, I went to the Mississippi Association Coaches Hall of Fame, and I was very fortunate there. And 2008, I went into the Athletic Directors Hall of Fame, and the Delta State Coaches Hall of Fame. I'm very fortunate to have been named those. I've been Mississippi Press Coach of the Year 4 or 5 times. I've been the Clarion Ledger Coach of the Year 2 or 3 times, and very fortunate to have worked with people that helped me get into those Hall of Fames and get into those places of honor.
Well, I think Moss Point has been fortunate to have you, and you've certainly had more success than anybody, I believe, at coaching in Moss Point. And congratulations. And
thank you.
I appreciate your attitude of recognizing people and being a little reluctant to tell folks about the awards. But I think this is important that someone from Moss Point has been recognized at the level you have, and you've had a great career. And we appreciate your time here today. Before we leave or end this session, is there anything I haven't asked that you might want to add?
Well, I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunity to work in Moss Point. I've had chances to go to colleges, and on 2 or 3 occasions, and I decided to stay and work in Moss Point. And I think it's the people in Moss Point. Moss Point has a lot of great people, and good athletes, good coaches, and just good people. And if I could go live somewhere else right now, I'm not sure I would go there, because I enjoy living in Moss Point, because Moss Point has been good to me. Moss Point's been good to my family.